Hello and welcome back to the Every Single Detail series. Today we will be talking about the part properties and in general parts. And the parts I'm talking about is this section right here in the model tab. Now there are two things I will not be going over in this video that is in this section. One, the material manager. I will be going over the simple materials that Roblox gives you, but not the material manager, and the generate as well, the AI generate. I will also not be going over the texture generator in this video as well. Anyway, I'm gonna get started as quick as possible. First things first, as I like to say, in order to insert a part, you want to be on either the home page or the model page. I recommend being on the model page anytime you're building something. There are 5 different parts that you can technically choose from. Actually, there are 6, which I will talk about in a second. First, you have a block. Then you have a spear, and then you have a wedge, and then you have a corner wedge, and then finally a good old cylinder. When you first get into Roblox Studio, they will most likely be this color. In a more organized fashion, I have it like this, which I think looks pretty neat. That's also in the thumbnail. So the first thing I want to talk about is the properties. In order to bring up properties, if you are not seeing this, you should be. You can go to view, always have Explorer and properties open. The first property I will be talking about is the BrickColor property. Now, this thing is the exact same thing as this color thing up here. What it brings up is basically like a bunch of hexagons of different colors. If you select any of them, they'll give you the name of them, which is pretty nice. So really red, for instance, will make it that color, which is really red. But what a lot of Roblox developers, if you know this or not, they will tell you to never use BrickColor, especially in scripting, which is why we have color. Now, for me, I'm on Mac, so it's gonna look something like this. On Windows, it will look a tad bit different. And what this will allow you to do is just pick any color in a what is known as a RGB number layout or something like that. It goes from 0 to 255, I believe, for each digit. So if you do red, for instance, it's going to be 25500 is technically what it would be. And then you have blue, which would be 255 on the last one. Green would be 255 on the middle one. Then you also get material. Now, again, I will not be going over the material manager but Roblox does give you quite a lot of different materials to choose from. They added 8 new ones, by the way, which is pretty cool, like leather, cardboard, etc. So let's do diamond plate. This is a classic Roblox one. You can also change the material here in properties, which is what I typically do. So yeah, that's how you change material. It's very simple. And I forgot about this one, CastShadow. If you have it off, this is called a Boolean. I have trouble pronouncing things sometimes, but it's basically true or false. If it's on, then it will cast a shadow, which you see right here. If it's off, it will not cast a shadow. Next, you have material variant. I will not be getting into this because this kind of connects to material manager, but hint, hint, it has something to do with material service, which I have 2 right here. It is a really confusing one, so I'm not going to get into that in this video. So I'm going to be skipping that. Reflectance is quite cool as well. If I get something that will probably show it better, which will be glass, and I turn reflectance all the way up, it's basically going to reflect the sky right on there. If you try and do a mirror though, if you want to really make a mirror, this will not work. Sadly, it will not. There are probably tutorials online that will tell you how to make a mirror in Roblox already, but sadly, if you have like a player, it's not going to reflect it like a mirror. It only reflects the atmosphere and stuff like that. It's kind of sad, but it's still good for making windows. Transparency is also very simple. If it's at 0, it's going to be not transparent. If it's at 1, it's going to be completely invisible or transparent. Now we move down to Archivable, which is used in scripting specifically. I won't get into that as well. Then we have Locked. Locked will make it so you cannot click on the part no matter if you have select on or if you do not. You have to manually go through Explorer and click on it, and then you have to go all the way down and hit unlocked, or which you might have already noticed is up here, you have the same thing. You can also unlock every single thing that is locked in the workspace by just hitting that. But if I do the lock tool and then I click on this, and then now it should be locked, and you'll see that this is now a check mark. Pretty simple. If you hover over it again and hit unlock, then it will unlock. Next we have name, which is, if you look in the Explorer, the name of the part. This is very good for organization, and probably the most important thing for organization, because it will take you ages to look through here and figure out which thing is which. Typically, I recommend recommend not putting a space in it as well. You can probably do an underscore, just because if you ever try to script, you cannot have a space in any of your variables or any part name. Another thing, never have any numbers in the first section of the word. I don't know, something like that. This also can mess up your scripts quite a lot. Also no hashtags, I think. Just keep it with normal words. Then you have parent. A parent is another thing to do with scripting. Basically, the parent is the workspace. The child is the white part. Now, this is something that a lot of scripters have probably tried to explain to you thousands of times. This workspace is the parent. It's like the leader of the white part. Every single one of these is in the workspace. The white part is considered a child. Then you have this base plate, for instance, is a child of the workspace, but there's also a descendant. A descendant would be this texture, but this texture would also be a child of the base plate, and the base plate is a child of the workspace. The base plate is the parent of the texture. The texture is a descendant of the workspace. Yeah, it's very confusing. Basically, that's for scripting and stuff. You don't really need to change this in any way whatsoever. I recommend not. Then you have these things which you cannot change, I don't think, unless you use the command bar. I believe, just in general, I don't think you would want to change these in any way whatsoever. But UniqueId is the unique ID of a part. Every single one of these has a different ID. Even if you duplicate it, it'll have a different ID. Doesn't look like it, but this thing goes on for a while, so that's probably why. Moving on, we have transform. I already talked about all the transform tools, which are these things, and snapping as well. But yeah, anything that you do in any of these will change those bits of properties. You can also manually set it in here to whatever you want. You also have pivot. This allows you to do a crap ton of other stuff with rotating and whatnot. I already have a video out about that, so I'm not going to talk about that or go into detail. But similar to the transformed section, the pivot will show that stuff and you can manually set it to whatever you want. Then you have behavior, which typically has like only one thing in it unless you change stuff drastically in the game somehow. But for this, it's EnableFluidForces. It's like aerodynamics and how a part will move in it depending on its mass and physics and whatever. I won't get into physics at all in this video. Anyway, we have collision, which is CanCollide. It's like the same thing as collisions, which I talked about in the transform tools, but during the simulation. So if this part was moving towards this thing, it would get stopped by it rather than keep on going through it. If you have CanCollide off, for instance, then this thing will like go through whatever it touches. Then you have CanTouch, which is another thing to do with scripting. But if your player, for instance, touches the part, then it will like act in some way. For instance, in this kill part script, where if the kill part is touched, then it will kill the player. So if this was off, then if the player touched the part, it would not kill the player. CollisionGroup is another thing to do with scripting. I won't get into that at all as well. Anchored is a pretty important one and pretty major one. This is also up here. If you have it anchored, that means that it will not be able to move during a simulation. I also talked about this in the transform tools video as well, I believe. But yeah, if it was off, then this part would be able to go all the way down and then stop at this base plate. If it was on, then it would stay in midair. This is also really important for like doing tween service, which is a way to animate parts. If you have anchored off, then it will not be able to play a tween at all. If you have it on, then it will be able to play a tween. Then you have custom physical properties. I won't go over this at all. There's a lot of them. This is also important for like cars and a lot of physical stuff. Sorry, there's a lot of things I won't get into, but these are very big topics as well. Then you have massless. This basically makes it not have any weight at all, which I want to actually re-go over something. If you go over to material and then you select all of these, you'll notice that that mass thing will change. Kind of weird, but they made it so that every single different material made by Roblox, and if you make your own materials by using the material manager, it can have a different type of physical way. So basically metal is going to have way higher mass compared to like plastic or whatever. Yeah. Then you have RootPriority, which I also will not get into. Sorry, but this has to do with assembly, which is, oh my gosh, it's confusing as crap. But that's another thing to do with like physics and how something loads in compared to loading out. It's weird. I don't understand it that well, but I still have a little bit of knowledge with this, so I will talk about it as well. Then you have shape, which is basically all of this, but you can change the shape via this. Then you have tags, which I never actually understand, so I don't really want to teach you how to use it. It's for scripting. You can make it so a part has a tag. It's like adding a value to a part, even though you can do that in a script. Same with attributes. Attributes is like the better version of tags. I feel like there are probably videos out there that will explain you the actual reasons to use these, but I don't really understand why you would want to use these, so I don't think it's value to teach you how to, but there's probably a video out there if you want to really know about those. Anyway, that's basically everything about the normal parts. Now I'm going to move on to the mesh parts. This is a mesh part, which you can actually just insert by going over to this plus icon in the Explorer by workspace and then just searching up mesh, and then it'll be right there. So that's what that is. Pretty simple. There's also a bunch of other types of meshes, but I won't talk about those. There's so much things I won't talk about, but I will eventually talk about them just in a separate video. I will not be going over all of these though using this one because it will probably not work, which I probably already talked about in the beginning of the video. So I will be using this one, which is from another video, which is ground. I don't know why I chose to use this one in this video, but I decided, you know what, it's the easiest one to get because it was just over there. So yeah, there's a lot of other ones such as double-sided, which is the first one. These ones are all basic and I already talked about them. Double-sided is for stuff like a leaf or like a very flat mesh that you make. It doesn't change the appearance that much. It just makes it so it's rendered on both sides. Render fidelity is a bit interesting. If you go farther away, for instance, this tells you how detailed it is basically in a simulation. If you have it as something like precise, then it's going to be extremely detailed even when farther away. If I'm wrong about this, please let me know as well. Usually you want to set it as automatic just because it's simple, but performance will make it so that it will look worse and worse the farther away you go. Precise, it will look the best no matter how far you are, unless it's like 10,000 studs away or something like that. I forgot the number. TextureId is weird. TextureId I don't understand because you can literally just add a texture just by doing this and it will do like, I don't know, I just have random ones here. So this water texture, for instance, looks pretty good. You can add it to any side you want. It looks good. It bends it somehow in some way. It does it good, as I keep saying. But you can also add a texture right here and then it's just bigger and you can't change it. I don't understand it. Maybe there's a practical reason for this, but I don't know. Yeah, collision fidelity. This is probably the most important one in the properties, is what I would say, but it doesn't work. So one of the biggest problems that I have, especially when making these grounds from Blender, is that if my player were to walk into here, for instance, I would be legitimately floating. This is actually in this video, which you might have seen. Actually, I just forgot. I cut out the part where I actually talked about it. So I would be floating in this river part, even though it goes into the ground, and I set CanCollide off, which is weird, but basically this setting right here, which is collision fidelity, would make it so that it would not be bad. So if you set it to precise, for instance, this would basically like allow the player to go up and down the bumps and it will like actually track it good so that the player will go into the water instead of just floating over it. It seems to not work though. I try to fix this so much times, but it just never seems to work for me. Fluid fidelity is another thing. It's similar to collision fidelity. This is also for aerodynamics. So if you had used collision geometry, then it would like take the collision box, I believe. So like the boundary around here, for instance, and then it would make physics via that. But if you use precise geometry, then it'll like make the wind, for instance, you have wind over here, then it'll make the wind go down into there and then go up, I guess. Supposedly it does that, but I doubt it will. Roblox is really bad at that. For some reason, it makes me mad. Anyway, yeah, the last thing I guess I will talk about, I believe that's the majority of it, other than group and group as a folder, which a folder is basically a collection of things, which is nice for organization. A model is multiple parts into a bigger part, basically combining things. You probably already know that. A truss is a very classic thing in Roblox, and this acts like a texture basically. So you're able to raise this up and it looks like a truss. This is basically a thing that a player can climb. Now, what makes it kind of weird though, is because Roblox allows you to also do the same thing where like a player can climb on something via just having like a ladder made out of this. Both would work, but this is just a classic thing in like obbies and stuff like that, so it's really nice. And you'll notice that you cannot insert this via that. You have to actually go in here, hit the plus icon, and insert a truss in order to get that. All right, the last thing, which I think is the coolest thing out of them all, is this little tiny icon right here. This is such a cool thing, which I'm surprised that it's not like a bigger icon, because it's literally like super tiny. This will allow you to paint stuff. Yeah, and change the material of something. But yeah, as you can see, you can just paint a part, whatever you want it to be. You can also do it with the material if you wanted to make something like a glass material, like I just did. This video is quite a jumble of mess. If I did get something wrong and you want to add on to something, please comment. Yeah, I'm not gonna always be right in this stuff, and I kind of stumble in my words. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you later. You know, I wonder, after all of this, does it really matter?